they were divided up into roles. Each person in the group, a group of 4 to 5 students, had a role. So the different roles were, there was a writer who was responsible for writing the intro, the outro to the podcast, as well as writing any narration that would go on throughout the body of the podcast. There was the documenter who was in charge of documenting the whole process of making the podcast, as well as creating a visual representation of the podcast to go along with it. They did that on Google Slides. There was the host who was responsible for being the voice of the podcast, doing the interviews, as well as talking through the intro and outro. And then probably the hardest job was the sound engineer who had to put it all together at the end. So throughout that creation process, they were responsible for recording and interviewing each other, for doing all the written portion of the podcast, for doing the editing, and they had deliverables along the way. It was a 3-week process from beginning to end to get the podcast made. So each week they had a deliverable that they had to produce along the way as a checkpoint.